Well, we finally made it. The final battle of the Arrancar arc and the fight that has been promised since Ichigo watched Aizen take off his glasses. It's been one hell of a journey to get here. We've been introduced to so many interesting concepts, had so many shocking revelations, and met all kinds of characters that went on to have some incredible battles. And as the war between Soul Society and Hueco Mundo reaches its climax, we're left with Ichigo standing alone against Aizen, ready to protect his hometown and by extension the Soul King and the rest of the universe. This is it. The substitute Soul Reaper versus whatever Aizen has become. I was so excited and so ready to see this clash, to see if the Arrancar arc could stick the landing. And well, let's get into it. I was really looking forward to seeing what Ichigo could do after his training in the Precipice world. We know he went through months worth of training in there, so it was cool to see him immediately show that he's not the same as he was. I loved Aizen's initial disappointment when Ichigo showed up. Because he didn't sense Ichigo's spiritual power, he thinks that his big experiment failed to reach its potential, and considering how smart Aizen is, it's great to see him be immediately proven wrong. He's planned this since Ichigo was born, orchestrated almost everything we've seen in Ichigo's journey, but now he's facing a factor that he wasn't prepared for and didn't anticipate. He wanted to give Ichigo more time to evolve, but he didn't expect him to evolve like this. Aizen is so sure that he knows everything and that the way he thinks is best. He's not really prepared for alternative methods or alternative ways of thinking that differ from his own, because he probably doesn't think that any other method would compare to his own. So it's really great to see him faced with something he not only didn't account for, but looks down on. To finally see his ego get toppled. Ichigo grabbing Aizen by the face and bringing him to a more isolated location to protect the civilians was awesome, and such a classic Dragon Ball move. He wants to protect his town and his friends, and given what plane of power these two characters are on, it's smart to get them away from anyone that could become collateral damage. And just the way he immediately manhandled Aizen was so satisfying. I think it's that so many of Aizen's fights have been him not being able to really be touched, only for Ichigo to just so blatantly and disrespectfully grab hold of him like that. It's just a great tangible way to set the tone for us, and especially for Aizen, that this isn't going to go the same way as it has been with everyone else. I love that start, and I love the look on Aizen's face. I didn't really have a chance to talk about Aizen's evolution last video since I was so focused on Gin, but Aizen's transformation into a butterfly, in a very literal sense, felt right after all of that chrysalis business. I do like the juxtaposition of such a dangerous, deadly individual being represented by something as pretty and gentle as a butterfly. There's something very telling about all of Aizen's scheming and lying, seemingly turning him into something so beautiful, but more on that in a bit. In a way, he's still presenting an illusion, though he's only really tricking himself, convincing himself that he's this gorgeous, ethereal, graceful god. The design helps reinforce his own opinion of himself for us, so that it's even more fun to watch Ichigo set that viewpoint on fire. But Ichigo went through his own physical metamorphosis. I mentioned last video that his hair grew out a bit, but the real change is his sword. Like, look at that thing. Awesome. It's funny that just a few tweaks to his appearance can really help sell how different he's become and how much he's grown. And it's even further emphasized by what happens next, because what I loved about this confrontation is the way that Kubo just beat by beat really showed off how strong Ichigo is now. Ichigo catching Aizen's sword is such a wonderful callback. Aizen doing that to him is still such a memorable moment in the series, and I love the reversal. It's an action that firmly set Aizen so far beyond Ichigo before, and now, well, the tables have turned. It's a genius way to show that things are very different, and now Aizen is being put in place and being given a taste of his own medicine, really. I also cracked up when they clashed and Aizen was like, "I'm even stronger than I thought I was. One swing of my sword and I cut the mountain." Only for Ichigo to be like, "That was me, actually." So good. And even when Aizen realizes he's losing in a physical contest, he uses this massive Kido with all of this buildup only for Ichigo to like slap it to pieces. The whole thing is just awesome. And Kubo, step by step, shows Aizen and us that Ichigo is dominating this fight. And he is. Ichigo has never been more badass than he is in these chapters when he's just utterly humiliating Aizen. And it's just fun for me to see Aizen squirm a bit and finally not be the one that's dictating the action. He has been a puppet master pulling all of the strings in the series, and now he's starting to really feel what it's like to be on the performance stage with everyone else, where he can no longer be controlling everything. And Aizen only has himself to blame. If he hadn't turned Ichigo into this wouldn't be happening. It's a classic mad scientist thing when their own creation becomes their undoing. Most people that have done any damage to Aizen so far had to be sneaky about it, like Yamamoto's whole explosive attempt or Gin's betrayal, but Ichigo isn't coming up with little hidden attacks. It's the first time we're seeing someone damage Aizen in such a direct way, in ways that are really hurting Aizen, both physically but mostly his pride. I will say though that as satisfying as it is to see Ichigo just pummel Aizen like this, and it is so satisfying, I'm a tiny bit disappointed by just how completely one-sided the fight becomes. Just a little. I wish Ichigo's boost put him more on Aizen's level, or like a little above, instead of so far above him, but I can see why Kubo chose to do it this way. Aizen spent this whole battle dominating others, and it was time for him to feel that, to be shown that he's indeed not at the top, and to know that it's at least partially his own fault. As he talked about, he helped push Ichigo, helped hasten his development and growth, and now that's all coming back to bite him in the ass. It's really awesome to see him get wrecked like this, but a part of me does wish there was a little bit more back and forth, instead of Ichigo just kind of tanking everything Aizen's throwing at him and then beating him to a pulp. At least with what happens next, I would have loved for just a little bit more of an even contest, because what Aizen turns into is terrifying and way different than how he's looked, but I actually really love it for that. I'm both disturbed and absolutely enamored by the fact that Aizen's face is visibly like pulled to the side for this monster underneath, and it's so gross but awesome, and I love the symbolism of it because in a way, this monstrous face that's beneath his skin is the real Aizen. Violent, cruel, power-hungry, ugly. And the face that we've been shown, the face we all know, is really nothing more than a facade most of the time. It's his mask, essentially. He's always been wearing his mask, similarly to Gin. But where Gin's was fooling everyone else, Aizen's mask, I think, was fooling himself, that he is this, beautiful god and not this disgusting, hollow-esque creature. He's not a handsome renegade soul reaper captain. He's not an angelic butterfly god. He's a disgusting beast that's finally showing what he's really like when he's no longer in control of perception. There's no illusion anymore. This is him at his most real and his most pathetic. I love when a villain who has been so composed when everything is going their way completely unravels when things start to fall apart, and Aizen's really coming apart at the seams, like literally. Still, again, I wish Aizen turning monstrous actually evened the playing field a bit, but it doesn't. It seems like it does for a second, only for this to actually be another example of just how much stronger Ichigo is. And again, it's cool seeing Ichigo so powerful, but I would have loved if the fight was just a little more of the two being pushed to their absolute limits against one another, blow for blow, But again, I understand why Kubo went this route, and I think it's extremely effective in its own right. It's not the most even fight, but that brings its own flavor to things. It's a dismantling of Aizen more than a proper duel. His plans are falling apart, his composure is falling apart, and he's breaking down completely with no real hope of winning. I think it's really interesting to see Aizen this way because it's a beautiful commentary on power and what it can do to you. Prior to fusing with the Hogyoku and his metamorphosis, Aizen seemed to have everything so meticulously mapped out, and was always so careful. And it's been a point in the story that he's gotten sloppier as he's gotten stronger. I could see an argument being made that maybe this was a necessary plot point for Kubo to do in order for Aizen to be beaten at all. Like maybe his intelligence was nerfed, or maybe he started to act differently in order for him to actually be able to lose. Like Aizen might have been depicted as too cunning and too well prepared to the point that he shouldn't possibly lose in any scenario, but even if that's partially the case, I don't think this feels like a desecration of the character in order for him to lose because he's the villain. I think it actually works really well and pretty naturally to see Aizen be dismantled by his own hubris. There's just something so mythic about his rise and his sudden fall. I love it. He gained his wings, he ascended very high, almost as high as he wanted to go, but it made him lose sight of what was still below. I also should bring up that there's an interesting thing happening with both of their Zanpakutos during all of this that I meant to bring up a bit ago, but I'll do now. When Ichigo came back from his training, not only is his sword different, but it's now connected to him by a chain. This obviously is to show in a visual way that he's more connected to his Zanpakuto than ever after fully embracing his own power and his own self. I love the little detail of that, and that his sword seems to disappear entirely when he becomes GadzStudio itself, but I'll be talking about that form in a little while. As for Aizen, as he grows in power, or evolves as he likes to say, his Zanpakuto seems to be merging with his arm, replacing his hand. This isn't really focused on much and not given any elaboration, so here's what I think is going on with that. We know that the Zanpakutos are very personal and representative of the spirit of the one that wields them. We know that his sword can control perception and conjure illusions and is the perfect kind of weapon for a person like Aizen. So I think that him merging with his sword, physically, is actually very telling about what he's becoming. I talked a bit before about how Aizen's metamorphosis and his belief that he's becoming a god is all really an illusion that he's fooling himself with, lying to himself, so maybe the sword joining with him is to emphasize that fact. Like now it seems like it's always released, or right out in the open, or maybe even it's like visually showing that he doesn't feel the need to hide the nature of his weapon anymore. He hasn't been relying on hypnosis as much since his change, so maybe it's meant to show that he's more blunt and upfront with it now. He has nothing to hide. This is who he really is and what he's capable of. I don't know. But it's fun to try to find the meaning in the little things that Kubo adds. It was definitely an interesting little aspect of his evolution that I would have loved to have seen be touched on more, but yeah, from what little we got, that was kind of my takeaway from it. And we finally see Ichigo show off the final Getsuga Tensho and learn it's literally meant to be the final one because using it strips him of his Soul Reaper abilities. I was right about Zangetsu wanting to protect him, by the way. It just made sense that the spirit of Ichigo's weapon would care most about protecting the one that wields it. Ichigo had to accept the parts of himself that he didn't understand or even resisted understanding in order to access like the ultimate power. But it's crazy that he has to give up everything he has in order to use this, which I think is a great way to resolve this. Because this is obviously a massive thing to happen for the story of Bleach. Ichigo gained these powers in chapter 1, and now the status quo will completely change without them. If Aizen really is responsible for Ichigo's power and his growth, then Ichigo giving up his powers is ridding himself of what Aizen forced upon him, stripping himself of what Aizen probably sees as his accomplishments. He views Ichigo as an experiment, and the more Ichigo grows, even against him, the more Aizen is probably proud of himself that he made that happen. But Ichigo taking away Aizen's work while simultaneously using this decision to break Aizen down is a beautiful thing to see. At the same time, though, becoming a Soul Reaper has been so important to Ichigo, so giving up those powers means giving away a massive part of who he has become. His whole life obviously changed since meeting Rukia, and gaining those powers and all of that new purpose that he found as a Soul Reaper is being put on the line. It's a sacrifice he willingly makes to protect everyone he cares about, a completely selfless act in order to defeat such a selfish enemy. This design, as he uses the final Getsuga Tensho, when he becomes the blade itself, is definitely the most distinctive one that Ichigo has ever had, and is the one that looks the least like him. Usually, any transformative change for Ichigo is like, oh, he's got a new sword, or a new robe, or he's wearing a mask. His most extreme power up to this point is probably when he went feral against Ukiura, but that hollow form still had Ichigo's hair color. You know, this design looks nothing like Ichigo at all. You could have showed me this and I would have never guessed that it's Ichigo. I would have thought it's some badass new character, maybe an enemy or an ally. And that's great. I really love that because it highlights how he has become something new. And by doing this, he's taking away what's made him him. And this attack is crazy. Just one final huge attack to slash Aizen with all this power. It's just such a big, powerful moment. And seeing Ichigo's new form dissipate after the attack when he might still need it was scary, because Aizen still gets up. Ichigo running out of power as Aizen is still healing and still surviving is the kind of struggle I wanted, and kind of makes up for how one-sided the rest of the fight was. They're both hurt and exhausted, and at the ends of their respective ropes. It's a nerve-wracking moment considering how much of a cockroach Aizen has been. Even after Ichigo put in literally everything, it still isn't enough. As much as I would have loved to have seen Ichigo fully finish him off, I love what we got instead when Urahara arrives. Because Urahara comes to seal Aizen away, to really defeat him after Ichigo has put in all of this work. And while this might seem like a cop-out or that Ichigo had to be rescued, it doesn't feel that way with the way it's presented, and it actually feels right, in my opinion, for Urahara to come finish him off after Aizen's been beaten down so much. It's like I've talked about before, Urahara versus Aizen has kind of been the actual conflict in the background of Bleach. Two geniuses playing a game of chess. So I'm glad that Ichigo got to have a big victory and a crucial role, but when push comes to shove, it is still Urahara and Aizen, and Urahara gets the last laugh. And I'm just a sucker for when a character mixes their battle tactics with like an unnoticed analytical move that doesn't pay off until later. Something that Kurama and Yu Yu Hakusho would do. It just works when it's an intelligent character like Urahara, and it shows how, yes, he did outsmart Aizen by placing a seal in him when he didn't notice. I'm honestly glad that it seems like Aizen's just gonna be locked away and not killed, because he is such a great villain, and I think he deserves to be defeated and to have time to think about his loss and where he went wrong, rather than just being killed. I think that's even more of a punishment for someone like him, because Aizen's such a big thinker. He plots everything, he notices everything. He's gonna be going back in his mind over and over and over and figuring out where he went wrong, or hopefully plotting what he's gonna do in the future. But also, what a tease about the Soul King, by the way. To hear them refer to the Soul King in such a vague and abstract way just immediately makes the gears start turning in my head. Like, it makes sense that the Soul King might be far less personified than he seems from how people talk about him. Some sort of divine entity that is beyond understanding and complete comprehension. It's great to have these two geniuses, two of the smartest characters in the series, talk about the Soul King like this. It says a lot, and it just makes me so excited to learn more. Though a part of me kind of wants the Soul King to remain this kind of unknowable thing, to have Aizen go through all of that, but still not be able to fully understand, is pretty great. He didn't reach the top. He might not have ever been able to reach the top, but he caught a glimpse of what was there. But even then, seems to not know exactly what he saw. It's just real good. So Aizen is sealed away by Urahara after being beaten down by Ichigo. It's a great way to end this climactic fight. The two characters I most wanted to defeat Aizen, that Aizen has kind of messed with the most, arguably, although he's messed with a lot of people. I liked that they were the ones that finished him off, at least for now. So if this is the end of Aizen in the story, which I doubt because he's still alive, let's get some Hannibal Lecter scenes where, we go to prison and we ask him questions where he helps out from his cell. Let's get some of that. Or he just comes back as a major threat again in the future. I'd be okay with that too. If this is the end of him though, what a fantastic villain. I've talked about him endlessly over so many videos about how genius of a character and as an antagonist, how great he is, legitimately, and I don't say this lightly. Aizen is one of the best villains I've ever seen. He had the perfect balance of intelligence, intimidation, intrigue. He's the kind of antagonist that so many writers try to create, but often are never able to fully capture. He's a true puppet master and was such a driving force in these past hundreds of chapters. And it's weird to think about what the series is going to be like with him not as the main villain. So unless the next arc starts with like a jailbreak and he gets busted out of wherever he's been sealed off to, I doubt it. And that wouldn't be very satisfying. But I will miss him. Hopefully we'll see him again in the future. When it comes down to it, was this final fight a satisfying way to end this huge conflict? I'd say overall, absolutely yes. Mainly because of how appropriate it feels for someone like Aizen to be beaten like this. To recognize that despite all of his efforts, he had not evolved into something perfect or something superior to all. He was outsmarted, thanks to out-of-the-box methods that he just didn't account for, too confident to believe that anything could really stop him. It may not have been the most even fight in the series, but it was a great way for Aizen to go down. If I had one gripe though, not really a gripe, but more of a wish, it's that Orihime ended up playing some role in Aizen's defeat. So much of the early part of the storyline was about her importance and her strange reality-altering abilities, and while it was clever to have that be a red herring, there was still a lot of great development and setup for her character that seemed to be leading to her playing an integral role in the endgame of the arc. After all, Kubo went out of his way to plant the idea that maybe her abilities could counteract the Hogyoku, maybe even destroy it, but that wasn't ever really followed up on in any meaningful way. After what she's gone through in this arc, it would have been cool to see her have a big win and contribute toward Aizen's eventual defeat. That's all. I guess in retrospect, Orihime's storyline wasn't really related to Aizen as much as it was related to Ukiura. Considering what a powerful story arc that became, I can live with Orihime mainly being used for that, but I hope that what was established for her during this arc will come back to be a really important thing, or a helpful thing, because with a power like hers, I'm excited to see where she goes from here. It feels like this arc only scratched the surface of her potential. But besides that, which I can live with, I'm very fulfilled by how Aizen was finally beaten. But what a great win for Ichigo, despite what he had to give up to do it. But I can't wait to see the fallout of all of that and how Ichigo Kurosaki handles it. That's it for now, guys. I can't wait to see the aftermath, to be honest. I need to see what's going on. But you know what's crazy? Aizen's beaten, right? We still haven't seen Kenpachi and Byakuya beat Yami, so maybe the battle's not over. Maybe Yami is still a problem. Maybe Yami's going to be the big bad guy for the next arc. I don't know. We'll see. I'll see you all next time. Take care. Bye.